Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. This is our working session. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. The time is 9 a.m. And because we have some remote counselors on the line, I would ask Pam to please take the roll call.
Baraboo,
Present.
Friedlieb,
Here.
Paulson,
Here.
Beyondich,
Present.
Johnson,
Here.
Baranzelli,
Here.
Present, thank you.
excuse me, Larry, could you also note who is present in the room?
I will. That would be my next item on the agenda, and I will certainly do that, Pam. Thank you. In the audience we have today, we have Matt Reed from SCH, our engineer of record. We have our city attorney, Brian Lindsay, and I don't know who this other gentleman is could you please let me know? Paul? Paul Moe from People's Service. I recognize your face, but I don't remember your name. Okay, thank you. Paul Moe from People's Service. Did you get those names, Pam?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn the regular agenda over to our city administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. And the first item on the agenda is a request for a purchase of SCADA equipment. Is that how I say that, Paul? For the wastewater treatment plant. And we do have Paul Moe here from the wastewater treatment plant to discuss the system a little bit. I know he's not the one that installs the system, but you probably know more about it than I do, Paul. So I appreciate you being here.
And I would have one question with respect to this only. So anything you'd like to add about Paul or present today?
No, I'm just here in case you had questions.
I do have one question looking at the contract, Paul, that you have the cost associated. That does include sales tax, which I understand that. But fees, what are those fee services? Are they monthly fee services as a result of this, or what are the fees that are attached to this proposal?
The only fees that I'm aware of is sometimes when we call in to have them work on the system, then there's a fee there. But other than that, I'm not aware of any fees.
Okay, thank you. So this is a replacement of equipment with the same kind of scenario I had before?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Paul. And the money for this comes from where, Gary?
Out of the wastewater treatment.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any councilor have any questions for Mr. Moe? Councilor Paulson, do you have any questions of Mr. Moe from People's Service regarding the upgrading of this equipment at the wastewater treatment plant?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Beyondich?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. We're changing Pantheon, and does any of that connect with what's going on over there with our upgrade with Pantheon and other folks?
The only thing that changes over there is they're going to get fiber, so they'll get a better internet system. This in-control system is built specifically for wastewater treatment plants for access remotely, so that Paul, and this is where I need you to, what I kind of know and what Paul knows more than I do, where he will be able to access if there are alarms, failures, things happening through this system. And so this is why this system, it's a customized, specific system for the wastewater treatment plant, which will benefit greatly from the new fiber that is going in there and the better internet service.
All right, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Johnson. Any other questions or comments or concerns from the council today? Okay, we're looking for a motion to approve. Thank you. Councilor Johnson?
I will move to approve the expenditure and contract accordingly.
Motion to approve by Councilor Johnson for the upgrades of the wastewater treatment center. Is there support?
All support, Mayor.
Support by Councilor Baraboo. Is there any further discussion? Yes, who was that? Further discussion, was that Councilor Paulson or Councilor Beyondich? Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Mo.
Thank you.
That was painless. Thank you.
Very much. The next item on the agenda is, if it's okay, I'd like to move Matt Reed up, since Matt Reed is here. So could we move up item number 4, review the bid for Bailey's Lake Trail improvements?
Okay, thank you. We're bringing, Pam, we're bringing Matt Reed forward for item number 4 on the agenda to review the bid for the Bailey's Lake Trail improvements. Matt Reed. Matt, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you.
We opened bids for the Bailey Lake Trail back in May. It was actually on May 13th, and we've been holding on to the bids as opposed to bringing them forward because Britt did apply for some additional funding from the IRRB, which we understand we did get funded. So that's great. I don't know if you've seen the contracts or not yet, Britt, but they've indicated that it got approved. So that's really good news. We did only get one bid, and the bid it was broken up, if you recall, into the base bid, plus we added several alternates to just see what we could do with the budget that we had. With the budget, with the additional money from the IRRB, we are able to afford right now, if we take this one bid that we received from George Bogalis and Sons, we are able to afford the base bid plus alternate 1. So that would give you the entire trail reconstruct, lighting along the east side of Bailey Lake from the bridge, the north bridge up by the Wasabi Trail down to just north of Veterans Park. So it's almost half. It would also get the new pier put in. So the existing pier would not be removed by the contractor. That was one of the alternates. Britt did speak with Ed Alto, and Ed thought that their crews at some point, whether it be in the winter time or whatever time, they could go in and remove the existing decking on the existing pier and lop off the abutments or the poles as low as they could get them. We had intended for them to go underwater and actually cut them at the mud line, but they could get them cut off at least below the water level as far as they could get down to get them off. So we don't have enough in the budget to do everything, but we could certainly get a really good start. And we're just at a position right now where we've got a couple options. I don't know, did Jim Bogalis come? He did not. Okay, so Jim Bogalis was potentially going to come to the meeting. He's the president of George Bogalis and Sons, but he's not here. We've got two options as I see it right now. We either award this bid and move ahead and do the base bid plus alternate 1. And then we could continue on with this in subsequent years, which we plan to do anyway with phase 2 with the rest of the lighting around the west side of the lake, the west and the north side. Or you could decide to throw out this bid and you could try to rebid it later on in the year. We have talked to a couple of different contractors as to why they maybe didn't bid it, and they indicated that it was the timeline. So trying to get it done with the workload they already had, trying to get it done by August, September timeframe wasn't really feasible for them, so they didn't bid it. They indicated that if we were to hold off and bid it in the fall, rebid it later in the summer to start in the fall and carry over, that they would potentially bid it. Of course, there's no guarantees that would bring the price down. Might, but we don't know that. So that I guess is the discussion in front of us this afternoon, in the morning, wherever we are. They all run together. That's the discussion we have right now to decide how we want to proceed with this project at this time. So I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. I'll start. I have a couple of questions, mostly comments, maybe a couple concerns. One is that we only got one bid. So if we were to wait, we don't have any guarantees if a bid's going to go up or it's going to go down, and what the timeline is with respect to that. But what's congruent to that is you have, our plan was to do the entire Bailey's Lake Trail, and we can only do what we can do. But the concern that I have is with projects that we've had in the past, long time ago, not most recently, where a project was done half and never completed. So if we would do the Bailey's Lake Trail, for example, as an example, we award the bid to Bogalis, they begin the construction, they work within the timelines that have been established, and we have a part of that's done. at what point will we do the other half? Would it be next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now? And is the lighting going to be the same? And is going to be, so is one part of the trail going to deteriorate to the point where maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, we don't get that done? So I think that's a concern or a question that I have moving forward. So I don't want to compromise, from my perspective, the integrity of the project, because it's a one-time opportunity for us with, 577 or 500 and some thousand, $550,000 from the LCCMR, and then I think it's another $227,000 from the IRRB, right around there. So I'd like to move forward with the project, but those are some of the concerns and questions that I have, that we really should come up with a plan that if we're going to continue, that we have a way in which to access additional funding or apply for additional funding to try to complete that project as quickly as possible, so there's not a huge gap between the time we start it and complete what we can and the time we restart it and finish it. So thank you, Matt. First Counselor Johnson, and then on to Counselor Bearable, and then to Counselor Freeby. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, can you give some specifics that why there's a almost $200,000 difference? Is there anything that really stands out? Why that happened?
And maybe if I could, real
please.
quick, before I answer your question, Counselor Johnson, so to address what the mayor was asking about, just to be clear, in the base bid, the entire trail itself, the trail itself would be completed. Okay, the only parts that would not be completed as part of this that we were calling phase 2 would end up being the redecking of the North Bridge, which that's not in all that bad a shape. It needs to be redone, but it's not all that bad a shape. And the redecking of the trestle, and then any lighting from Veterans Park around the south side of the lake up to the North Bridge. So just so everybody understands the complete scope here, because what Mayor Cuffey was alluding to is correct. We need to make sure that the whole project encompass lighting and the whole works, but just so everybody knows, the trail itself would be done in its entirety. It would just be the amenities, a little bit of the lighting and some of these other miscellaneous things that wouldn't get done. So just to clarify that for you.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep, and Counselor Johnson, the things that stood out to me, as most of the items were within the realm of what our estimate was. The items that stood out to me were the mobilization and then some of the material items like Class 5. That was a $20,000, close to $20,000 more than what we had estimated. Where was the other one? The select granular borrow was a little higher. Let's see. There were a few items. It wasn't the bid as a whole. There was a half a dozen items that kind of contributed to that. I mean, the mobilization by itself was $70,000 more. So, and when you look at the base bid by itself, it's about $130,000 more than what we had estimated, and the mobilization accounts for about half of that. So. And of course, as I think we've had this discussion before, what goes into a contractor's mobilization, of course, it's the mobilization itself to get the equipment there, but then they usually put their bonding costs and some of those other things into that because they're able to capture a good amount of that up front so they can pay or recuperate their costs that they had to do those things. So if Jim was here, he could maybe give you a better idea on how he put his bid together, but those are just some of the things that stood out to me.
And I share the mayor's concern. I don't like the idea of half lighting, because right now we have half lighting. So I also, I appreciate that when we do this with the alternates, but that the trestle is kind of dangerous. I've taken kids over that thing for many, many years, and 5 years ago it was not great. So is the contractor willing to work with us at all to be able to create the bid? I mean, is there any negotiation that can be done, or because my concern is what's going to happen is what happened when we bid the library and the pocket park. When we rebid it, we awarded it, and then there was some concern that we didn't choose somebody as local as we could have, but it was because of the way it was bid. Britt, when does this money need to be spent by?
I think it's 2022, Matt, was that?
If it's 21 or 20, let's see. I think it's 22.
I thought it was 22, and the IRRB money is a fiscal year 2021, so it'd need to be spent by next June.
Because I guess I'm kind of leaning more towards rebidding it like we did the other projects, that maybe we can get a couple of contractors. I don't like that now everybody in the world knows what this bid is, and so now they can adjust accordingly. I don't know that that's fair, but then everybody would have the opportunity to rebid it, including these folks, is my understanding of how that process works. So I'm not comfortable awarding this because there truly is no guarantee either that they would be done by the end of this construction season, barring any kind of weather event or any other thing that can happen nowadays when it comes to. I see Britt like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and Matt just sent an email yesterday because of is it the long-eared bat?
Yeah, so I don't think regardless, they would have it. See, originally we were planning on starting this thing back in May. By the time it gets recommended to council today, if it were to get approved next week, contracts get in place, I don't think they would start until the middle of July, would be the soonest that I think they'd be able to get started. And then we should have our wetland permits in time, but with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a requirement with roosting season of the long-eared bat. And so that goes into effect, or is in effect currently, and some of the clearing and grubbing wouldn't be able to happen until the 1st of August. Now, would that be a deal breaker? No, because they can work in other areas. But nonetheless, they're not gonna be able to start in those areas until August. So either way, and with the lighting, by the time they get the poles, those things are got a pretty hefty lead time, as we've seen on recent projects. I don't think they would finish anyway, and I think we would, because we've postponed awarding this until now, I think we'd already be talking with the contractor about giving them an extension on their time, because we've taken a month and a half away from their construction season already, so FYI, I guess.
And I would, if Brian would be comfortable, I'd be interested on hearing where he stands as this is a Parks. Oh, you did sneak in. Brian, if you could give us some perspective on managing an additional project.
As far as managing the project goes, whenever we do it, it'll have the same management requirements to oversee the project. One of the reasons that we were pushing to have it done before winter is because a lot of the people from the Laurentian Manor use that trail in the wintertime to get to downtown. So we were wanting to have it accessible for them, just so that we're not taking that away from them. At this point, even if we award it now or if we rebid it, we run the risk that that trail will not be accessible for them over the winter, and they will be having to utilize sidewalk systems.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may follow up before we go to the other two counselors and maybe the one on the line, Matt. So, and maybe this might be a question for our city attorney, alluding to what Councilor Johnson had indicated, that, we're considering this bid. We did bid it out. We only received one bid. So if there's a way, because we only have one bid and there aren't any other contracts involved, a way to look at negotiating the issues that we have, that you have concerns about, which is the extra money for the $20,000 more that you had estimated for a Class 5, and then the additional, the cost for mobilization. Can we negotiate that with the contractor as far as the bid goes in order to move forward? Seeing as we only have one bid, it wouldn't affect any other bid process?
Mayor, I'd be very careful about doing that, and the reason why is once we start negotiating, that may change the terms of the bid, and once we change, then all contractors, by the statute, should be given an equal opportunity to bid on the new set of terms.
That was my fear. Thank you very much, Brian. Councilor Bearable?
I'm really concerned that we don't get this project started this year. We can do an extension until next year, have them work on the the side, the alley side that's there, that one, that gives them access, the residents of Laurentian and the other entities to downtown, once we get that completed. Now they're walking on an alley that's plowed, but how good is it plowed? You can do that all the way around. Matt, could they lay the wire in while they're doing the trail? Because it's going to be underground, correct, all the way around? Is that a huge expensive extra cost, or can they do that as they're completing that trail on the west side?
Good question. I'm glad you brought that up. We had planned on having them run the conduit for the wire from where they're gonna terminate by Veterans Park over to the trestle. We had that much in there because once you get that trail in there, there's not much room to put conduit in after the fact. From the trestle around to the north bridge, there's a little more room, so we, again, as a cost savings measure, we did not have them put that in there at this time because they do have room to get it in without disturbing the trail later on. That said, if that's something that you wanted to explore, I'm sure we could add that into the project, but that's going to, of course, change it would be an add change order at this point, but they could.
Yeah, my concern also is the IRRB grant. If we hold and bid again on this project, that's going to delay that money. Would they be willing, Britt, do you think, to extend that time or not on that grant? Because sometimes they will, sometimes they won't.
We can ask for an amendment, and we'd have to explain why we need one. And if we just state we only received one bid, we needed to extend it, or however, we have a multitude of reasons.
And I'm also concerned the competitive edge that I don't care if the other contractors bid, that's their problem. But you give away the total price because it's public now, the bid. So that somebody is going to come in under that bid on this individual. And it's not fair to this company because they made a good faith effort to bid this project. We've done many other projects with just one bidder over the years that I've been on this council. It happens. If the other contractors are too busy, that's good for them. This one maybe is not, and I don't have a problem with this. I'm not going to be able to vote to extend this or go back for bids because of that reasoning. I don't want their competition to know the full value of theirs and force them to drop just to make sure they keep the business. They've already made a good faith bid on this project, so I won't support extending this. We've been monkeying with this thing for I don't know how many years, 6, 7, 8 years, somewhere in there, trying to get this completed. We had to buy all that land out first, and that took a long time. So I think we should award the bid to Bogalis. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
I was just gonna maybe, as Charlie was saying that, I was thinking, Brian, if the contractor, say, came back and was able to find a different material supplier, for example, so that we're not changing the scope in any way, but they're willing to adjust some prices. I don't know if they will. I'm just bringing that up. If they're willing to adjust some prices based on some things that they're able to do on their end without changing quantities, changing scope or anything like that, would that be something that would be acceptable?
Yeah, they could just bring that to the council in the form of a change order.
So that there might be, I don't know, that if Jim's not here, I'm not gonna speak for him, of course, but if the council decided to move ahead, we could certainly ask the question if they're able to do something there.
Well, we're always willing to welcome change orders that reduce the cost of the project. So thank you very much. Would you have your light on there, Councilor Freelieb, or?
I was just gonna ask, so the IRRB is covering the full cost of the $699, $309.95, or?
No, we had received a LCCMR grant for $550,000, and IRRB, we requested, I think it was it
50.
$250.
But we're covered
We're covered.
for the full cost of this bid.
There's a portion, about $98,000, that is coming out of the Lakes Beautification Fund. Every year, Lakes Beautification is granted $20,000 of levy money, so they've been saving for quite a few years for this project. Like Charlie said, it's been a 6-7 year project.
And essentially what we'd be looking at today then is completing the trail, completing half of the lighting.
Correct.
Our crews would take out the old pier, but we would have the new pier put in. So essentially, the only thing not finished would be the second half of the lighting.
And the decking on the bridge and the trestle.
The lighting for the second half of the lake, just the lighting. The trail would be done.
The trail would be done, but the second half of the lighting, I don't, that's just because they run out of money to do that then, or?
It's a cost fact. That lighting's pretty expensive. And that's what when we got into it, when we started looking at it and we had to trim back, the only way to really substantially remove or would have added anything was the lighting itself. So,
And it would not include the trestle decking
right, correct, would not.
or the curb?
Or the bridge, correct.
Okay.
Now, I'm gonna say this cautiously, but if we ended up going back to talking to Bugalis, if they were able to free up a little bit of money, then it would be possible, maybe possible to add one of these alternates back in. But I think the first alternate we would want to add back in is alternate 3.
Are city crews able to redeck?
The North Bridge, they think they could. The trestle's a little more complicated, but they think the North Bridge they might be able to handle. But they will take out the pier. They will be the ones that are going to do the pier this winter.
I'm a little troubled by piecemealing things together like this. I mean, it's just, it's, and yet at the same time, we have somebody ready and willing to do as much as possible. It's just, I agree with the mayor, like, then how and when and can we eventually complete it? That's troublesome, but, it seems to me, given the resources we've been availed, it's timely to move forward, and then we figure it out from there, how to get things accomplished eventually.
Thank you, Councilor Freely. Councilor Paulson, any questions or comments regarding this award to Bugalis for the Bailey's Lake Trail?
I appreciate, Matt, the clarification on the original estimate. And so the total that Bugalis' bid was $130,000 over the original estimate. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. For the base bid, it was
For that
$130,000
base
more.
bid. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then, I mean, I appreciate going through everything, and I was just looking over the different items, like number 57, 58, that's partial lighting. Is that correct? Those are pretty expensive items.
Yep, that is correct. That's for the lighting just on the east side of the lake.
Okay, and I mean, I don't mean to throw a wrench in here, but was any of this maybe discussed when Amoresco came through here at all with part of this project with what we are doing with the rest of the city with lighting? Or is this something totally different in terms of the lighting requirements or needs?
Everybody in the room that I'm seeing anyway is shaking their head that no, it was not included as part of Amoresco's contract.
But I think,
Okay.
is it still energy efficient lighting?
Yes.
Okay. Please continue, Councilor Paulson. Thank you.
And thanks for that clarification. I guess I was just thinking that, you know, over time, that with what we were doing with Amoresco, the city was going to be recognizing savings. So I was just trying to figure out if there would be a possibility to do it that way. But the bid that they put in was including what they could, basically what we could afford. And then to add in options, you know, as funding, we could get more funding. So is that kind of what you're asking us to go forward with then, Matt?
Yeah, excuse me, yes, that's correct. So we have the budget, and then we've got the costs. And with the budget that the city has currently, and discussing the priorities with the alternates, with the staff, and to be honest with the alternate one, with the constructing the new pier, was part of what you had put in your LCCMR grant application. So that one really needs to be in there if at all possible. So yes, what we're suggesting is if we were to award the bid, it would be for the base bid plus alternate number 1. That would still leave the city with a little bit of a contingency for unknowns as the project moves forward. And you should have all of your costs covered between what Britt was talking about with the LCCMR grant, the IRRB grant, and the Lakes Beautification contribution.
And then have we heard any feedback from the Lake Beautification group about what their preference would be in terms of completing the project, all of the lighting, everything, all the bridges, the trestle? Have they given any input at all?
We'll have Brian Silber answer that question for you, Councilor Paulson.
I believe the Lakes Beautification Committee is a lot like our city council here. We would love to see the entire project done at one time, but we realized that we do not have the funds to do that. So what their priority is at this point is the pier, because it is part of the LCMR grant. And then also wanted to ensure that at least we had the lighting on the east side, as that is the portion of the trail that is heavily used by our senior adult population. The redecking of the bridge and the trestle would probably be the last thing that the Lakes Beautification Committee would like to see done, just for the simple fact that those would be less costly to do as independent projects on their own in the future.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Paulson. Counselor Beyondich, any questions, comments?
Not at this time, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thinking a little bit differently, the Trails Beautification Committee, are they an independent 501c3?
They are a 501c6.
Okay. So my thought is could the beautification people, we know how many lights need to go around the lake, right? Could they, sell's not the right word, but could they have, could they get donations and then each light post is in more memorial too? And could we potentially raise $41,000 that way with them seeking out donations from the community, and then we would have to, by resolution, accept the donation of the lights, or how, like we've talked about with doing it benches, would that be an opportunity to do some fundraising around the lake to pay for that extra ad alternative?
That may be better suited for a 501c3 like Revive,
Okay,
or maybe even Virginia Community Foundation, one of the two, if we could ask them if they could partner with the city to take donations on our behalf to, or even the Brewfest Committee. There's another one that, another 501c3 that might be able to help out.
or even
And drive.
Friends of Public Safety, lighting around the lake is a safety issue. So,
Correct.
so there may be some different alternatives not involving the city directly to fundraise an extra $41,000.
Correct. And
Okay.
IRRB has a grant program for tourism that has to be applied for by 501c3s only, cannot be applied for by the city.
Okay,
And that is one of our showcase pieces of Virginia, is the Bailey's Lake and the trail. You know, it's going to be a really nice trail when it's all done. So if we could have one of these groups apply on our behalf, you know, with the intent to help pay for part of these lights, they may be able to get $25,000 from that fund too.
perfect. All right, thank you, Britt.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Counselor Bearable, you ready?
I am ready. I promised you I wouldn't take up a ton of time today.
Well,
I believe the Virginia Foundation has an obligation here too. We should ask them, have we done that yet for some dollars? Because this is a huge community project that should be part of what they spend their money on. And I haven't seen any big things they spend any money on recently in the community, so I think we need to ask them. Also, a question, Britt. The program with Amoresco, with all the savings, the SIP program that the utilities has to give us credit on, is that money all going directly to that Amoresco? Or is there going to be some leftover that we could use from their coffers for this lighting? Because they give big, huge things, like the Target got $70,000 in credits to the utilities. Can't we get it in cash instead of credit? You know, in the future, I don't know exactly how that works, but they give credit on bills.
I would have to check with Bill Hofdahl
Okay,
on that
because I
to
sit
see.
on that, and they're always having reports on the SIP, how much they have to have. They have to have a percentage of their budget by state law every year for credits against utility bills when this stuff happens. So if you could check with them, that's another source maybe.
okay, thank you. I'm ready to move forward. I made my comments. We all have. The project has to get done. We have to at least start it moving forward from my perspective, and then work on finishing the project through these other funding sources and alternative fundraising efforts. So if there's not any other questions or comments from the council, I was asked for some council action.
Mayor, I'm going to move that we accept this bid from Bucalis and Sons with alternate number one at this point, so that is my motion to bring to the full council.
A motion by Counselor Baraboo to move forward with the recommendation for the awarding of the contract to Bugalis with the base bid and alternative number one for the Bailey's Lakes Trail. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Counselor Freelieb. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Britt, would you and Matt be able to pull out just for funding purposes for asking that lighting portion and the wire? Can we get a total of what that would cost so that if there is a community group that wants to help support that either through the foundation or through asking via IRRB that we have a specific number, and then maybe whatever's left we divide by the number of poles, and just so that we have some place if someone's interested to start instead of them asking and then prolonging that. And so, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and supported to move forward with the award with respect to the Bailey's Lake Trail Project to Bucalis. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
I'm going to move down to item number 5, since we have Paul Moe here with us still. Request from the Biosolids Disposal Site Authority to allow the City of Evelyn to use this Virginia's permitted biosolids land application site.
Now, please come forward, Mr. Moe. I know we have an agreement, it's like a joint powers agreement, right?
Yes, for the
So
authority.
We can't ask Evelyn to pay for that service. Okay. Oh, Mr. Moe.
Yeah, I just became aware of this last evening. I haven't had much time to check into it, but my understanding is that if Virginia accepts these biosolids, they become Virginia's. So they're responsible that all the testing was done correctly, all of the requirements from the MPCA for land application were done correctly. All the metals and stuff we check for land application will become Virginia's and add to the accumulation. These fields are only allowed so much metals and like mercury and nickel and, and then they're done with. So it's not really a problem taking it. It's more paperwork on the city's end or on our end, I guess. So.
Okay, so, Mr. Moe, we have the capacity to take the product, but once we accept the product from Evelyn, it becomes the responsibility of the city with respect to any issues with the MPCA to meet the requirements for payment for costs associated with the managing of that. Is that correct?
Well, the biggest thing would be, how environmental, long-term, ramifications as far as, you'd be responsible 100 years down the road, but it's no different than what you're already putting on there now.
Okay, is this what is the reason for the request all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but why now is Evelyn making this request to dump biosolids at our site? What were they doing with their biosolids before, do we know?
Yeah, I was in that letter. So the city of Virginia also has sites up there, and what happened is the phosphorus level became too high to apply. So we have to get a variance to use them fields. Well, City of Virginia, we use United Taconite for mine reclaim, so we haven't been using them field and we don't need them. Well, that's all they have here. I understand they have some property at Great Scott, so I don't know why they wouldn't be taking that avenue. I was just aware of this last night, so.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just curious to where Evelyn was taking their biosolids before.
They're up there at St. Louis County landfill. They have fields up there, but the phosphorus is too high for them to apply to them. We do have a field that, the City of Virginia has a field that just got approved, so hasn't been hardly anything applied to it. And so I'm sure that's what they're requesting, that they can use that field there. So, no.
Okay, I have concerns about approving this until we get some further information, but Counselor Bearable.
Well, I have the same concern, Mayor. They've got 30 acres in Great Scott now. Isn't there a limitation of what they can put out through the treatment plants in phosphorus biosolids? Isn't there a state MPC mandate on that or not, Paul?
Not on phosphorus, there isn't.
Not yet,
It just,
not yet.
whatever gets in the soil, then they're worried about it leaking into the water table, so they check it that way, but there's nitrogen, but there is no phosphorus limits that they put for annual hauling.
I have a concern, Mayor. I can't go along with this because there could be some hidden cost down the road. I can't go along with this unless we put a legal agreement together with them. If any costs show up where they're going to dump on our site, they need to pick up the cost.
Yeah, I think we need more information too. Thank you. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And that was going to be my question. How time sensitive is this request? Do we know? I see that this is a temporary agreement ending August 31st. And I guess my question would be, does that mean for the next 3 months they're going to be hauling extra to fit in? So those are the two questions I would want answered, is how time sensitive is this request? And then, and why would, if we have a space over at Great Scott as well, and we don't use that, can we transfer land so that it goes on their land instead of our land? Those are the kinds of things I guess I'd like to know as well.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, moving forward, I mean, it's looking at the investigative aspect of it and how that moves forward. Now, this just got approved. Everett is aware this got approved. Now it's easier for them to send the biosolids to our new facility in Virginia as opposed to going to Great Scott. And they're asking for a temporary agreement through August 31st, which may envelop into something more permanent. So I guess, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, thank you, Bill. Bill Hennis, Pam, we're going to call Bill Hennis forward. He just entered the room and talk about this particular topic. And if you would add to your notes as well that present for some conversation was our Park and Rec Director, Brian Silber, as well. He has since left, but he was here earlier. You hear that? Get that, Pam? Pam, can you hear us?
Sorry, yes, I can.
Okay, very good. Did you, okay, thank you. Bill Hennis, from our city engineering department. Bill. Turn on your mic, please.
Alrighty. From what I understand, one of the levels have come out of compliance now for one of their permits up there. And what they're looking for is this summer to be able to apply up there on our property, which we don't not apply to. We haven't applied up there for years again because we take everything to EVTAC up in our biosolids. So what they want to do is they need to go through a growing season. I think it was the nitrate that was out of, or phosphorus was out. What they have to do is they have to go through a growing season. So what they do is they grow the grass, they harvest it, take it off site, and then they're hoping that it'll be back into compliance. But it's only for this year. So you have to decide whether it's worth for the city to allow them to be in ours. Again, the only thing we dump up there is when our summer crews are cleaning sewers or sucking out a manhole or whatever, we dump our Vector up there and that's it.
And it's the same type of biosolids that we dump as Evelyn is asking to dump?
They dump a liquid, we have a solid. So they go up there basically with a big tank truck and it goes up and they spray their material up there, where we actually press our biosolids, and that's where we come up with a cake. And that's why we use it, or are able to use it at EVTAC and other areas in field apply it.
So they're asking for this temporary agreement to permission so that once the growing season moves forward, they can move back to where they were before?
Yes, they're hoping that they can.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very good clarification. Thank you, Bill. Counselor Bearable.
Bill, before you leave, is that the site that we abandoned up by the landfill areas that they're talking about?
This is our new site up there. Okay. Again, St. Louis County bought our old fields up
That's
there,
right.
and we traded for some new sites up there. This will be applied to our new sites.
Okay, so we could use it for the pressed biosolids if we ever had to.
We could, and
But right now,
again,
we got plenty of room on Evelyn.
yep. And again, by us not using that up there, we're not putting the metals up there or any of the other byproducts up there. So we're basically keeping it a clean field for future use if EVTAC would ever go away or the farms out in Cherry.
So we need to look at that possibility of a legal agreement with Evelyn if any bad stuff gets up there, because we don't want the cost of that.
Again, this would be with the biosolids, not only the city of Evelyn. I believe you're going through the biosolids. Evelyn, again, is a partner of it. And again, from what I understand, they're agreeing to pay for all the testing and everything else. It would be at no cost to us.
So we need an agreement then, actually.
Well, we'll have an agreement with the Biosolids
Okay.
Authority.
All right.
Thank you, Bill. That clarifies things for me. We should stay up here for one moment. Counselor Paulson, any questions for our city engineer, or any questions or comments about this issue?
I guess I'd like to see a little bit more information coming forward, like maybe a land map of what, where each site is, and what the requested area is to be utilized by Evelyn. And then I had one question, is any of that mineral rights RGGS at all, or does the city own everything?
Bill?
The area where it applies is actually owned or managed by the Biosolids Authority. Again, we have, I believe it's 80-some acres up there dedicated to us of the overall, and that goes by the contributions that we give through the years. We pay, I believe, by per capita to help that whole authority to keep going. And subsequently, we're part of it. We don't own it, but that's our section of it that's dedicated to us.
So would that hold us harmless if in the future there would be some issue coming up, or is it kind of at our risk?
Well, it'd be at the risk of the Biosolid Authority, but ultimately, it'd be the 4 cities would be the ultimate responsibility. It's an authority, but you still have all the cities together on it.
Right, and it reads as a joint powers agreement.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Bill, appreciate it.
Mayor,
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. Counselor Beyondich, any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, Counselor Bearable?
Bill, when we got out of that county particular deal up there, that 4-way deal that was up there, we got out of the cost of that too, did we not? We don't pay any money into that anymore, do we?
Nope, the Biosolids Authority still exists as it did before, just in a new location.
We still pay money? I thought we got out of
Still pay them every year. We have a budget that we pay them.
I thought way back we were gonna get out of that because we didn't need that site anymore.
Nope, we still pay. The only thing I believe we don't pay our fair share of is the snow plowing, because again, we don't have to apply up there during the winter.
Okay, so that was where the cost savings was then. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, what is your recommendation, Bill? Any issues with this?
I believe as long as we don't inherit any additional liability, I guess I don't see a problem with it, as long as it's just for this year, and then we have to readdress it if it turns into a longer. Again, we don't want to use up our areas if we ever had to use it, but if we're not using it and, as being a partner, I don't think it's a bad thing right now.
So, if we made a motion here at the Committee of the Whole meeting to move forward to approve that agreement to allow Evelyn to use the biosolid disposal site, and then it'll have to go for a formal vote for the council meeting next Tuesday, we could have some additional information and clarification, and to address the issue you just talked about, if there's any liability or anything of that nature. And then the questions that some of the councils have could be answered by next Tuesday's meeting, so we can make a formal vote if we move this forward from the committee of the whole meeting. So, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Any other questions for Bill Hennis? Councilor Barnzelli?
Thank you, Mayor. Who owns that property?
Again, the Biosolid Authority.
But the whole, when you go down that road, go past that gate, that yellow gate, is that St. Louis County land?
St. Louis County has some up there, the Biosolids Authority has some up there, and I'm sure RGGS has some access up there also.
We don't have any land there at all. We rent.
We, as part of the Biosolids Authority, do.
Okay. Only on biosolids.
We might have, I don't think we have any property up there, to tell you the truth, Carl. I know we have some further to the north and to the west, but not right off that road.
This was property that was given to us for the four cities for the biosolid land. We have the authority to use that land for that purpose, and the four cities are involved with that.
And we got it from IRRB.
No, I don't think so.
I couldn't
Is that a
tell you,
mine?
Carl, it's been that long ago. I mean, it's been, the Biosolids Authority, from what I remember, it's been here as long as I've been here, 30-some years, and then before that, so, you know, it's something that's been in existence for a long time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, looking for some council action. Council Bearable.
Reluctantly, Mayor, I will move that we move this to the council meeting pending some further information on these questions that we had, but at least move it to the council meeting for finalization.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Moved by Councilor Bearable to move forward to approve, at least at the committee of the whole level, the request from the Biosolids Authority to allow the state of Evelyn to use the Virginia's permitted biosolid land application site. Is there support? Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
May I?
Yes, please, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you. Also, maybe have our attorney weigh in prior, just if there's any liability there, what that liability could look like.
Yes, we will have staff work and get all the information for the interested, all the parties that are of concern, including some recommendations from our city attorney, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I see Chief Lewis is in the audience now, so
Yes,
maybe we can move him
So
down.
if we can move some items around, Chief Lewis from the fire department is here. So if it's amenable to the council, I'd like to move up to item number 7, approve hire of 2 single-role EMTs.
Okay, Pam, we're moving up on the agenda, item number 7, for for Fire Chief Alan Lewis to give us some information about the hiring of the 2 single-role EMTs. Chief, good morning.
Good morning, council. Thank you. We do need 2 additional, we've gone through a hiring process, or a application process. 2 offers have been made at this time. We are still down 2 individuals on the department to come up to full staffing. That against the backdrop of 2 individuals who will be leaving this summer, or late this summer or early fall. We should receive a letter from one of those as early as today. We do need these 2 positions. We need to continue to establish a list for upcoming vacancies and shortfalls that will occur due to some medical issues as well. Asking that we continue to proceed on the hiring process. We posted again. I believe it's going to be open for 30 days this time, and we'll conduct a second round of interviews.
Thank you, Chief. And these are budgeted positions that are being utilized to maintain our staffing levels.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, looking for some council action.
I'll move to hire the 2 single-role EMTs.
Moved by Councilor Friedlieb to move forward with the approval to hire the 2 single roles EMTs as requested by Fire Chief Lewis. Is there support? Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion?
I do have a question if I could ask, please.
Yes, Counselor Beyondich.
Thank you. Chief Lewis, what is the average that when we do new hires, how long are we getting them to actually stay in the area?
Okay, so for the recent hires, it's been very, very good. The two individuals that are actually going to be leaving are actually lifelong members of the range area. So one or both for opportunities, one's actually been accepted into medical school, and so they do have to move out of state in order to pursue that. And the other one has a military commitment. So those are the reasons that we have two leaving, but most recently when we've hired people from this area, they have tended to stay much longer than if we have hired them from out of the area.
Okay, and I guess the reason I'm asking the question is, what does it cost for all the gear that you need for a new fire member?
So for a
And
fire,
if they don't stick real long, is that able to be used for another person, or is it fit for a specific individual?
so there are specific things that you don't want to share. One of those would be footwear, boots, personal protective equipment like a fire hood. Those are what we call disposable items, and those are individually specific. But things such as a helmet, fire bunker gear, which can run you up around $2,400 to $2,600, that can be reissued given that the person is the same size. Of course, radios and uniform items can all be utilized again. They're just some very, very specific things that are individually specific, just from a hygiene perspective.
Okay, and what is do they have a 90-day, or is it longer for a probation period?
No, all members hired with the fire department serve a one-year probation in the current class. So if they're hired as a single role, they have a one-year probation. If they're then moved into a dual role position, they also have another one-year probation after that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Beyondich. It's been moved and supported to move forward with the hiring of the two single-role EMTs. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I think we need, was it Counselor Paulson? Said aye? Counselor Beyond? Okay. Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Anything else you'd like to add before
Since
we?
Chief is here, there's one more item on the agenda.
Okay,
Item number
very
8,
good.
approve the resolution for the St. Louis County All Hazard Mitigation Plan. And just to give a little recap, we did have staff input into this, and Chief Lewis can elaborate on a little more on this.
Yeah, I've looked through that plan, Chief. It's very solid. Thank you for all your input on that. If you want to just explain to the other councils this mitigation plan, thank you.
I'll give the 30,000-foot overview. So the hazard mitigation plan is required under federal law for reimbursement or for grants that go along for hazard mitigation at the federal level. We participate with the county because the hazard mitigation plan covers the entire county and participating jurisdictions. We want to be one of those participating jurisdictions, so we're eligible for that mitigation money. There is a process that the plan goes through, which involves a public planning process where people from the community give input. Then a profile is developed of the entire St. Louis County. They look at the hazard or the risk assessment, what are our risks, and then they come up with a mitigation strategy as how to minimize those risks. And then there's a plan maintenance, which just requires that at a minimum of every 5 years, the entire plan be updated, put out again for the public planning process and input. This resolution just simply adopts the county plan, makes us eligible for that funding, and I just stand for any questions if anybody has anything. The entire plan's available online. It was sent to you in an email. I think Britt included the link in that for the forward from Holly Olson at St. Louis County. So, yeah, I know the mayor has looked at the plan. So if anybody's interested or needs explanation, I'd be happy to help provide more of that. So, any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the councilors present? Seeing no questions, we'll go to the phone. Counselor Paulson, any questions with respect to the resolution that's requested on this mitigation plan?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Beyondich?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looking for, has it been moved and supported? Looking for a motion from some council action, please.
I'll move the resolution forward.
Counselor Paulson moves the resolution forward, and it is supported by Counselor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
I do have one other item if you would. So last night, we did transport a COVID confirmed positive patient. I think that email has gone out. I see Britt nodding her head, so Deputy Chief Frederickson was going to inform the police chief, but I thought the council should probably know as well. It's here. The crews that responded on it took all the appropriate precautions, didn't know it at the time, only found out about it after they had transported the patient. So good on them for taking all the appropriate precautions, but just want to let people know it is here, and just continue to take precautions, even though everyone, I'm sure, is getting very, very tired of the strain on everything. But just wanted to let the council know.
Okay, just one more quick question. I know that, Chief, you can't give us address-specific information, which I understand that, but can you say it was within the city limits of Virginia or not?
Yeah, it was just in the city limits.
Within the city limits of Virginia. Thank you, Chief. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. At Tuesday night's council meeting, we had requested that we discuss the emergency procedures plan, and I noticed that got not put on the agenda. So with the chiefs here, I would just like to know where we are. I know even Mayor had said that we should at least revisit it. So I would just like to know, I have a few questions about where we're at and if we need to continue and that kind of stuff. So I just think it's one of those things that's being visited in several places. So I would like to address it here as well so that we can all have the same information at the same time.
Okay, Chief, you want to address our continued participation in the emergency declaration and your perspective about that?
Yeah, the emergency declaration has at this point more to do with funding, I believe, than anything else. So this is a tough one because I know the argument is that if you continue the declaration, it gives a little bit broader power for very, very responsive action. I would also say that you could counter that with if there does have to be new or extenuating circumstances, that can be enacted again very, very quickly. So as I understand it, we in the city are still under the emergency declaration, and that's set to expire. There should be
council rescission or when the governor's order expires.
Okay, so it's running concurrent with, okay.
Yes.
I guess then it becomes more of a political decision than a public health decision. There's nothing that us as a fire department or EMS agency can't do that we need to do, whether there's a declaration or not. So I'm gonna defer on that to a council decision as far as it becomes more political than it does operational. If I thought there was an operational benefit to having an emergency declaration in process or in place, I would state so. But I can't say that, an emergency declaration gives us new powers or abilities or ways to do things that we wouldn't otherwise. So I'm going to respectfully put that back on the council.
And I appreciate that because I'm looking forward to early voting starts soon, and my understanding is it actually starts before July 13th, which currently City Hall is closed. I guess I'm looking at when do we open up the building to the public. In general, all of our workspaces are closed and locked. How are we going to be accommodating early voting for our citizens if the doors are locked and those folks may or may not have access to a cell phone standing outside of our door? I just want to make sure we're having a conversation and we're being very aware that life is continuing on, and if the City Hall is closed because of the emergency declaration, do we need to visit that, and how do we allow for City Hall to be accessible to folks who need to be voting or who have business. The county court building has limited access now. Other buildings are slowly, that was why we had you put together a plan, is so we could open up city buildings. The back rink at the Miners is open. So I guess I really, since this is our work meeting and there needs to be discussion, I don't feel comfortable just letting things ride at this point. I think I appreciate your honesty and candor about funding versus political, and I see that. I'm well aware of that, and I don't want to make it a political issue. I want to make it about the access, especially as we're moving forward on early voting for our citizens. So I would ask for any other perspective. Maybe Pam has something with the voting, and if she has a plan, or if there needs to be help creating a plan. And I've made some notes, so I'm looking at the notes, and I think you addressed most of those, Chief. But the early voting in City Hall, I guess I'd like to have that discussion.
Okay, as we move forward, we'll ask Pam to give us a plan if she has something under the emergency declaration or not. So my question is that by, it might be a question for Brian as well, but, you know, we have emergency declaration in place, still in place primarily because we've voted to allow that to continue until the governor's order is expired. And I think there was an anticipation that the governor's order would have expired, and it did not. And he continued to extend it and could extend it even more. And the legislature's vote this a couple of days ago to allow the governor to continue with the emergency declaration and voted not to sunset it or to stop it, you know, is a concern that we have as a community, because how long is this going to go on? So my two questions that I have about the emergency declaration: one, we know it's tied to funding. So if we would sunset it and the emergency declaration, does that affect our funding source? Number one, that would be number one question to think about. Number two is related to opening up our city hall and city businesses. If the governor's task force and the recommendation is that we don't, and we do, what is our liability for our employees and those kind of things? So so those are some of the questions I have. But before we move forward with the rest of the council for comment, let's ask Pam, do you have a plan with respect to the early voting and how that's going to go if we still continue to have the emergency declaration in place? Pam?
Yes, I do have a plan. I am working with St. Louis County right now. And basically the governor's order is that the absentee voting would continue. It is an essential function of the election administration, obviously. And they are suggesting we either do curbside voting or scheduling an appointment, basically either calling ahead, or if they do come, you know, they need to be informed of the process. One other suggestion I had is if they do want to come in the building, we still have the doors locked. They would have to call like they do now, but they should have a mask on, and we should have hand sanitizer available, as well as our staff should have masks available for them to wear also. But I think I had talked to Britt about this, possibly in the paper when I do my absentee ads, to put some information in there about the COVID and the process for voting absentee. And I actually have quite a few people that are requesting the ballots by mail, which is good. But now with Chief Lewis noting that we do have an active city, we should be more aware of how we want to really do the process.
Thank you, Pam. Councilor Johnson, do you want to continue?
Well, as we're talking about that, I know currently the absentee ballot is within the office of the city administration down there. Would it be possible to set up a polling station in the elevator entryway? And then when someone calls or makes an appointment, that way they're coming into the building, they're in City Hall, but it's limiting exposure to additional folks. That might be an alternative, or even in the hallway. I want to make sure that we are not creating barriers to individuals who may have economic barriers and don't have a cell phone or do not have the ability to call ahead. Maybe their only ability to get here is by dial-a-ride on a Friday afternoon, and I just want to make sure that we're allowing as much access as possible and keeping everybody safe as they're moving forward.
So, thank you. Councilor Bearable.
Yes, Mayor, you probably know my opinion already on this. The COVID-19 deaths, 81% plus, are in care facilities and nursing homes. They're not actively out there in the community. The 19% out there is a drop in the bucket. When you take a look at statistically, it's basically 1.7 people and 10,000 people are even catching this stuff. So the statistics aren't in favor of the governor. The governor is going to hang on to this COVID-19 money that's supposed to be distributed to the individual communities anyway. He's not going to do what he promised us. He promised us Metro would not verse rural, and he's reneging on this 100% with his stuff he's doing after his campaigning that got him votes to be elected as governor. I'm very, very upset with what's going on down at the state legislature. I think we can wait a little longer, but I think it's time for us to open this city up and defy the governor's order. Other cities are doing it all around Minnesota. Nothing's happening, and nothing's going to happen. There's no legal precedent for him to take a city to court on any of this stuff. So I think it's time we take a 7-county area up here in northern Minnesota and challenge the governor. We've tried to do that through Rams a couple of times now to get him to open up stuff, but he's not listening. He doesn't care about northern Minnesota. I'm going to tell you that right now. All he cares about is the votes down in the metropolitan area and in the big city areas to get him reelected again in the future. And I think it's time we stand up and we open this city up. We already got restaurants at 50% of capacity, which is more than 50% that they seat because it's based on the capacity that the fire department has. So it can be 60% in a facility, not just 50. It's based on the occupancy. And that's in the legislation that they just authorized. So you got people, I see less and less people in the grocery stores now with masks on. It's getting smaller and smaller every time I go in there to shop. Just take your social distancing, keep it there, wash your hands, do this, do that, and you're going to be okay. You know, they're finding all these studies out there, and they're saying, well, there's more positive, yes, but they're not telling you that the positives are already back in society without being catching for other people because they've already gone through it, and they don't even know it. So I'm just don't want to see us continue holding up and not opening up City Hall again. I just don't think it's reasonable up here. We've got one case, and we're not being privy to whether it was in a confined facility up here or if it was out in the open. That is, in my book, a non-HIPAA thing that they're saying is a HIPAA violation. You don't have to name a person. If you name where it is, that's a whole different story, an area. You don't have to name the exact address or the person's name. Then you violate HIPAA. Other than that, you don't violate HIPAA, if you know anything about it. And I've lived with it for 40 years when I was actively practicing pharmacy. So I think we need to open this city up and see what happens. They're finding in the states that they're opening up, there's that. They're finding out now with all these But I want to say it, I'm going to say the protests that are going on, that they're not picking up the cases they expected. The number of cases is not multiplying like they thought it would with all these protests. And it's been enough time now already. It's been, 10, 12 days now on these protests, and they're not seeing a big increase in COVID. So that's my opinion. But I don't want to see it because I don't think with what's happened down at the legislature, I've been reading anything about it. And I get updates every day, just like the mayor does, on what's going on down there. I don't think they are treating rural Minnesota with any respect at the legislative level, period. And that was a promise that our governor made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Guerrero. I have a question, Britt, and not to put any extra burden on you, but do you have a sense from the City Administrators Association or maybe Pam from the Clerks Association, how many city halls are still closed? And, they're going to handle the same issue with respect to voting as the concern that Councilor Johnson has. So how many other communities are they opening up their city halls? My sense is from the emails I got from the Minnesota Mayors Association that they're still closed.
Well, there's a few that are open.
There are a
Ely
few?
opened quite a while ago. Hibbing's intending to be closed for quite a while, but they're going to do something for voting.
Right?
And not every city does their own voting. Like Aurora, Town of White does their voting for them, not them. So there's
Sure.
different parameters. I haven't really asked anybody else. Maybe Pam knows some more. Maybe she's been in touch with a few more cities than I have.
The only one that I've talked to is Hibbing, and they did absentee vote application, in the Manny's Shopper. So I'm going to do that. They're trying to minimize the traffic as much as possible, but if someone does come to City Hall to vote, allowed in the building. I haven't talked to them as far as what they're setting up for requirements of masks or anything, but they're on the wall.
Okay, thank you.
As well as Grand Rapids. But actually, Grand Rapids, the county does all their absentee voting, so they don't have to worry about that.
Okay, thank you. So the question I would have is that, one, I know that, the issues with the concerns that our employees have about opening this up now, particularly in light of, now we have a COVID positive one in Virginia. Not only that, hopefully that's an isolated incident, but we have, my concern is that if we sunset the emergency declaration, does that have an adverse effect on the way we operate? Or does it impinge, if we continue to have it, does it have a adverse effect on our citizens to be able to exercise their rights to do just about anything? So, from my perspective, if we sunset the emergency declaration, I don't have a problem with that. If it moves forward, I don't have a problem with that. The only question I have, I want to make sure that we're safe and our environment is safe and that our employees are safe. And if other communities are opening up, we have to take a look at that. I know the Councilor Johnson, we had talked about bringing this up for discussion. This is another phase of that. We could take council action now, take a vote to sunset it if we wanted to open up City Hall, or we could just sunset the emergency declaration. We could set rules outside of that to maintain the health and safety and the concerns that our employees have without having that emergency declaration, can we not? So we can do that. We can still make some restrictions here. So I will go to and ask if Councilor Paulson had any questions, concerns, or comments about this, and then we'll move to Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been watching the St. Louis County website, daily. And there's, I watch the cases and I watch the location of the cases. And, up until this point, we really haven't had anything. I don't know, Chief Lewis could correct me if I'm wrong, but if this is the first one, it maybe changes a little bit of my perspective. And, I don't want to make this a political issue, but I maybe would like us to see, give it maybe a little bit more time to see any developments that could possibly come forward here in Virginia before we make a decision. I don't know if that makes sense, but in light of that information, I think it changes things a little bit on where I was coming from originally. And absolutely, it's imperative that our city workers feel safe. But it's also imperative that people are allowed to exercise their right to vote, and maybe we do that in a safe and different way. But again, I really don't want this conversation to turn political. But I do think we need the opportunity to look at what is happening, what is the pulse in our community. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we are. We can hear you very clearly.
Oh, okay. It just started echoing on my. So I think maybe we should continue a dialogue and maybe set a time to actually, like our emergency management coordinator had suggested, that this be visited maybe once every 2 weeks as the situation is fluid. But I really think that we should have some kind of plan, developed going forward with new developments, or with voting coming up. When, Pam, when does early voting begin, or has it already begun?
It starts June 26th.
So maybe we could, meet again or have this as an agenda item with, maybe forward what her thoughts are or what other communities have done. And then we can have that discussion since that early voting is starting pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bionich, anything you'd like to add? Any questions or comments?
Thank you. And I also don't want this to be a political issue, and opinions. There are facts out there that we need to look at, as we have an aging community and a lot of vulnerable adults. So I would very much be interested in seeing more facts instead of opinions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bionich. Councilor Freely.
Just real quick, I guess, I don't disagree with Charlie at all. There is a frustration with the umbrella-like application of this overall scene that we're dealing with. And I guess, I was sitting in a different conversation the other night where, the mother of a newborn child said to another person who had a different opinion, better safe than sorry kind of thing. And I guess, that's kind of where I'm at, in part because I do have somebody in my family that's highly vulnerable due to a lung condition that they're dealing with. And so I guess I look at it, the application of this, even though it's an inconvenience to the masses, it's providing protection to those who are most vulnerable, and it's not necessarily those in congregate living arrangements. There are people that are having to run to Menards and go to the grocery store and are wearing their mask. And I'm thankful of that, because they are making their effort to be protectant of those that are the least or are the most vulnerable in the community. And so I don't know what the whole politics conversation is or what the facts versus opinions is. The reality is there's a pandemic that's in place. There's a pandemic that's affecting millions of people, killing hundreds of thousands of people. It is dissipating, it appears, in many parts of the country. Never really seemed to reach us to the degree that we thought it might have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it still couldn't. So in any event, I guess the thing is we have to keep things in place, whether it's for the possibility of receiving CARES money. That's obviously a necessary thing for the resources we'd have to have available to us in this community. But from my standpoint, I think it's in the best interest of those who are most vulnerable in our population, even though it's an inconvenience and frustration to the masses of us. So that's kind of where I'm at. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I know this is a topic that was brought up because of the mitigation plan that we have. by Counselor Johnson, and we've had some significant discussion about that. The legislative session is scheduled to expire a week from Friday, and so we were hoping to have some news, and there's some anticipation that may be some news from the governor's office with respect to continuing forward with this emergency plan. We don't know for sure. So maybe, the concern about early voting, being able to have people access, I think Pam has a plan in place. I think we need to make reasonable accommodations to ensure everybody has the right to vote. But by keeping this emergency plan in place, we can still, if we were to sunset it, we could still make some restrictions. But I don't think it's having a significantly adverse effect right now, other than access to City Hall. We can make adjustments to the emergency plan and open up City Hall if we deem it's appropriate to do so. But I think by following the governor's, whether we agree with it or not, we don't know what the general consensus of the public is. We just have to make our best judgment based on what we think is in the best interest of the health and safety of our community, whether it's a political or personal decision, whatever the case may be. It's a health decision, and politics out of it and opinions out of it. It's, what can we do to make it in the best interest? But we want to make sure we don't, particularly at this particular time in this year where it's an election year, and we want to make sure everybody has that opportunity. So by having this emergency declaration in place, we don't want to restrict that from happening. I think Pam is beginning to have a plan in place. And to continue this for another week or so, or till next Friday, maybe the governor's will expire his order then, maybe not, and we can revisit that. But we certainly take council action by a vote today if you wish to do so, or just keep this at a conversational level until next Friday, when hopefully the governor will make some significant announcements just before the close of the legislative session. So does anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about, or anybody want to take council action at this time with respect to this process? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just appreciate the opportunity to have the discussion today. I had no other intent other than the discussion, so I'm comfortable at continuing as we are, as we continue. As it again changes daily with what's going on and announcements being made. So I just would like us to keep it on our radar as we move forward.
Okay, yes, thank you, Councilor Johnson.
Might I suggest that Chief and I work out a meeting date with the council to review this again, as requested by Councilor Paulson?
It's amazing how sometimes,
We're on the same
we're on
wavelength.
the same wavelength here, so, yes, let's do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Appreciate it. Okay,
Back to our agenda. Item number 2, we had a garage fire on June 6th, I believe. And as normal, we boarded up the garage once the fire was extinguished. We sent an invoice for the materials and the time, and we got a call from the property owner saying that this is an undue hardship and I cannot afford this. We explained to her that we could put it on your property taxes, and she again said it's an undue hardship. She can't afford any increase in her property taxes either. So she asked if the city would consider waiving the invoice, and so I am bringing it to you for final approval or discussion.
okay.
Or discussion.
Okay, thank you. Looking at that invoice, it shows $700 and some dollars. Most of it's labor, some of it's cost for materials. She doesn't have insurance on the residence. I don't know what the property taxes she pays on an annual basis, if that's going to be a significant burden. We took the steps as a city under our hazardous, making sure it's safe for everybody, and boarded up the property. There's no way to recover that cost based on the policy we have of keeping 25% of the insurance costs in order to help mitigate and make some repairs to the home. There's no option to recover there. So right now we were out $30-some dollars, whatever the case.
$710.39.
Very good. Well, so that's where we're at. Councilor Johnson.
I guess my bigger concern is that we have a garage on a residential street that is not going to be fixed. When a fire occurs, there is chemicals and other things that are released. So I think this is a bigger issue than $710.39. And we did what we needed to do, be safe. I don't like the idea of saying, let's just forgive it, because then we will never recover again. anything we do at any house. Anybody can claim any unexpected expense can be an economic hardship for anybody. Again, my concern is what's going to happen to the garage? When will that be taken care of? How does the city deal with that in the future? And I think we leave the $710 and it gets assessed on the property like we would do anything else. That's my, I don't know the person, I don't know anything about them. This is just and there's no emotion in this. This is just the logical thing that I would expect that if my garage burnt and the city had to do that, it would eventually have to pay the bill, or it would get paid when I sold the house or paid taxes or something.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Johnson. I mean, a question for Brian is that, I mean, this is, or the staff, this is like Counselor Johnson, it's more than just the 700 and some dollars, the cost associated with that. So the cost of the cleanup and those kind of things. And so whether that goes on a property tax or that comes in a form of a lien on the home or whatever the case may be, there's actions that we could take as a result of that. A lien she could pay that off anytime she wants. It doesn't go on her property taxes, so it's not a burden in the beginning. So we have options in which to move forward with this, and so this is just one aspect of it. So I think that the money that she's requesting that we forgive, consider forgiving, is also what are the demolition costs going to be? Who's going to clean it up? She has no insurance, so if the city decides under the blight ordinance, we're going to do that, we're going to recover those costs. So there might be more costs involved with that. So do we add those costs onto this $727 and either use that in the form of a lien or a property tax assessment or whatever the case may be? So it is more of a bigger picture than this particular request that we have now. Counselor Friedlieb and then the Counselor Bearable. Counselor Friedlieb.
Just for conversation, like, you know, there's obviously a cooling off period when a building's been on fire and it needs to be boarded up. Do we ever give the owner the opportunity to avail the resources amongst themselves, their family, and their friends to take care of what needs to be done at their own cost, potentially less than what we would be charging them? Or is it such an imminent situation that it needs to be done now? And so we just take initiative to get it done and then we bill the homeowner. I mean, I'm just taking into, I mean, somebody just suffered a loss of property and a fire on their property and, you know, then that's a cost in and of itself, and now you're being billed by the city. I can understand how that would be irksome, to say the least. I don't know. So this is just a typical standard operating procedure when these kinds of things occur.
Yeah, and before you answer, Chief, just you look at what the bill says right now, this one small part of the bill, which is maybe for a larger issue, is that there's the cost for labor in there is significant. The material cost is very, very little. Mm-hmm. So we have our employees that are working anyway. They're employed by us. It is time to be. So there are options that we have to take a look at. But I think, overall, we have to make sure that we ensure that we have a consistent application of our policies and procedures. Chief.
So yes, I just want to confirm that because of the exigent circumstances, either the investigation of the fire and the need to preserve the scene evidence requires that property be secured in a timely manner. We do allow that cooling off period. That's why they do that overhaul. But our employees then are called out and that do that work, then it is then sealed and no one else is allowed to enter it until the investigation is completed. And it is an imminent threat. I will also say that there were indications of human activity in that building prior to the fire. It would be what we would describe as an attractive nuisance. It was in it, people coming and going unsecured. The owner didn't necessarily want these people in there, but they were in there, and so you see the result that we now have. It will continue to be a blighted property and will continue to present a threat in terms of safety going forward. So what you decide to do with the billing and the labor, and sometimes the reason the labor costs are so high is you call people in on overtime off of normal working hours. 2 o'clock in the morning people come in, so that can be a substantial expense in labor. So hope that answered the questions.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Counselor Paulson, any questions about this or comments?
I guess I have a question regarding what is the standard procedure if there is a fire and it needs to be, like Chief Lewis just stated, boarded up for the investigation to continue. Would that normally then be billed and reimbursed or covered by the person's insurance company, Chief Lewis?
He'll be coming to the podium here, but yes, that's the case. But in this particular instance, she had no insurance. Chief?
Correct.
Right, I understand that, but is it a normal procedure then, like if that happened and there's costs associated with
Go ahead, Chief. I answer your
that,
counsel.
would
Go ahead, Chief.
Okay. Sorry, Councilor Paulson, I cut out just a bit there on the audio, but that is correct. The homeowner's insurance would cover those costs associated with the fire in most cases, depending on the homeowner's specific policy, but that generally is covered.
Back on. Counselor Paulson, did you get that question answered for you?
I did, Mayor. I think there's just a problem with my audio, so I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bearable.
Yeah, normally if there's a fire or any damage to a home and insurance pays, the city collects 25% and puts it into a escrow fund until that individual takes care of the damage to that property. I believe in all cases, if they can't be secured through insurance and they don't have insurance, you have to have mandatory automobile insurance. I wish that homeowners and building insurance in the state of Minnesota was mandatory, but it's not, unfortunately. But I believe we should lien this property, not put it on the tax rolls, but lien it, because then it carries over to the next owner on that property, unless that person selling the property makes an agreement to either lower the price on the purchase and the individual pays it off that's buying, or they pay it off. I don't think we should make exceptions, because we're open and kicking the can down the road for every other property in this town that may have a fire that's not insured, may have some other damage that doesn't have insurance, and we have no method for recovering unless it's a lien. And I know it's a harsh position to be in, but we have a lot of uninsured properties in this community. Tremendous amount that people don't insure. That includes businesses, unfortunately. So I'm not going to be a nice person to forgive this, but if they put it on a lien, they can pay it off over time. You don't have to pay it all at once. You have a period of time they can pay it off, just like we do when we do an assessment on a property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Bearable. Counselor Beyondich, any questions, comments with respect to this issue?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Counselor Freely.
And just real quick, just from an anecdotal standpoint with regard to uninsured properties, like we've deferred maintenance on a couple of properties, one in which we live and one that's next door that we rent out to our son. But in any event, for the last 30 years, we anticipated those being raised and bought by the school district. We no longer want them. So we recently contracted with a roofing company to come and do both homes. They did the fascia. They're working on some other, I'm not a real handy guy. I was brought up by a general surgeon who didn't like to pound his fingers or work on wrenches and so on. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time in a garage, so I'm having these contractors come. And one of the houses was not insurable according to our insurance company because of the roof being in such disrepair. So we got the roof completed, they came and inspected and was like, oh my goodness, you have knob and tube wiring. So guess what? We still can't insure your house. So now I had to get an electrician in there to look at what it's going to cost now to rewire this home. So, I mean, it just starts to add up, not to mention the fact both homes have to be converted to gas, and it's 10,000 after 10,000 after 10,000 after 10,000. So people that have limited resources, they can see how it can be just like nails on a chalkboard when they hear what they have to pay for things. But in any event, I don't think that we have to step away from what we normally would, seek from reimbursement for people for things that happen, but all around town, people are feeling the pain big time with regard to the costs that they're incurring for properties that are in excess of 115 years old. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor Freely. The request is, I think, for us to discuss this and to make a recommendation, right? So if we look at what recommendations we're going to make, we'll bring it back to, if we make a motion, whatever motion we make, but we have a policy in place, we have a procedure in place, we have a mechanism in place moving forward to address these kind of issues. The next item, one of the next items on the agenda is to forgive, some fees for businesses who aren't open anymore. And so that's another issue that we're going to have to deal with here, which related to businesses as opposed to just residents. So that apparently begs another conversation. But it's for those, we're giving relief for those who, were had to be closed. They may be financially strapped, just like this particular issue is here. They're two separate issues, but it'll be reflected on, what actions we take. I think, from my perspective, that we follow the guidelines that's been established by the city, long-term guidelines of using the lien or the property tax assessment moving forward, give that person the opportunity over time to make good on the costs associated with this, and to at least lessen the burden as much as we can and as possible. So that's kind of where I'm looking at. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? We should probably take some council action on this particular issue. And so I'm looking for some action steps by the council at this meeting. Does anyone have any thing that they'd like to move with respect to this issue? Councilor Bearable?
I'm going to be the bad guy here. I'm going to make a motion that we deny this request based on our current policy that we have in place already in the city of Virginia.
Okay, moved by Councilor Bearable to deny the request for forgiveness of the costs associated with this, the boarding up of the property. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Support by okay, thank you. Support by Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? We'll hang on here and see if Councilor Paulson did you hear that motion? There was a motion on the floor. Motion by.
I did, and I have no further discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Johnson.
My concern is that we will continue to get these requests and we will continue to have to deny them. I would be much more comfortable just with taking no action, because that would mean that we are following the guidelines. I don't think we need to specifically deny the request. So that I'm more comfortable at just taking no action at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but there is a motion and support on the floor right now, so.
I guess, Mayor, if I may, Brian, that would be the same thing as denying the request if we take no action, correct, with our current policy?
Unless the council grants the request.
Okay, I'm gonna withdraw my motion then, Mayor.
Okay, Pam, the motion to deny the request has been rescinded by the motion maker, which is Councilor Bearable, and also the second was rescinded by Councilor Freely. And the action we are taking this, that we will take no action on this and let the process work itself out. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, can we take just a couple of minute break? We'll just take a couple minutes. Councilor Paulson and Councilor Beyondich, we're just going to take a very quick break, and then we'll issue the other three items that are left on the agenda. Thank you. Let's take a break. Okay, well, we're back on now, so let's resume the meeting. Thank you. Counselor Beyondich, are you on the line?
I am here. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Paulson?
I'm here as well.
And Pam, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Very good. We are now resuming the council meeting, or the committee of the whole meeting. Next item on the agenda, please, Britt.
Thank you. Item number 3, the potential rebate of city commercial garbage fees due to COVID-19. At the May 26, 2020 City Council meeting, staff was tasked with creating a proposal for a rebate of garbage fees for those city businesses that were closed during the COVID-19 pandemic. I did a lot of research, and it was really a relatively simple process. I have kind of an old garbage list, but I had a good enough information that I could kind of gather what I thought was going to be the amount that we would return to these businesses that were closed due to COVID. I estimate that we would have approximately, we collect approximately about $44,000 a month in commercial garbage fees. Out of that $44,000, we have some very large businesses that did not close during COVID. So I really think that the estimated fee, if every single person that closed during COVID asked for a rebate, would probably be about $10,000.
And that money would come out of the
The garbage fund.
garbage fund?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And so I did go one step further and create a proposed form. It was supposed to say draft on it, and the draft didn't copy very well. However, I suggested, speaking with finance staff, that we set the dates of March 15th to whatever date the council chooses, June 8th, June 15th, whenever the majority of the businesses were open by June 15th. And that we set a timeline that you don't have the whole entire year to ask for it. You set a drop dead date. You need to ask for it by such and such date, that we will only consider requests into that date.
So a commercial garbage rate is about how much a month?
Depending on which business it is, the lowest amount is $26.50,
Okay, what's the highest amount?
$4,000.
A month?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So,
those businesses would be the ones that were still functioning and operating.
right, but the ones that weren't functioning,
Probably about $26.50.
so say average of $30 a month.
$30. Some of the downtown businesses, the bars that are a little busier, were about $110.
So they would save anywhere from $60 to $120?
Right, right.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. And this was something I had thought of as we've been looking at how to support our local businesses, and we did everything we could when they were partially open and outside open and that. And this is just one of those things for a small business, as you pointed out, Mayor, $60 a month may be their electric bill, or it may be the 220, our bars were completely closed. There was nothing going on for 2 months. And so as we look forward to this, the other part of that is that it was just asking the staff that any future COVID funding, and I'm ready to make a motion on this, any of that can be earmarked specifically to repay the garbage fund. So anything that we use to support the businesses when the COVID money comes in will automatically go back. So the garbage fund will be at a net not loss of zero. There won't be any negative consequences for future purchases or future garbage fund things. So I'm ready to make a motion, but I'll wait for additional input unless it'd be easier to have the motion to discuss.
Yeah, either way.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that the city rebate garbage fees from the dates of March 15th through June 15th for businesses that were closed or negatively impacted by the COVID shutdowns, with those applications to be received at City Hall by August 15th, 2020. That makes some nice, even things, and then have the staff move forward with that.
Okay, thank you. Is there support for that motion by Counselor Johnson? Is there support for that motion by Counselor Johnson? Is there support for that motion by Counselor Johnson? Counselor Paulson, are you on the line?
I am, Mayor, and I can't support because I need to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Beyondich, did you hear the motion by Counselor Johnson?
I did, thank you.
Okay.
I really hesitate to support this. I strongly feel that at City Hall, we really need to look at how monies are being spent. And this is exactly why I was looking into things earlier. We need to keep money available for situations like this. So at this time, I am not going to support it.
Okay, well, there is a motion on the floor by Counselor Johnson. Is there a second? And I think I announced 3 times, and there was no second to the motion. So the motion fails for the lack of a second. Did you want to make another motion? All right, thank you. Next item.
The next item on the agenda is item number 6, authorize consolidation of parcels in Progress Park, or the former Spectrum Health parcels. And Brian may be able to help a little more on this discussion. This would be the parcel that they purchased from Spectrum Health, and then the roadway, and then the property across the road from Spectrum Health, consolidating into one parcel.
And I think initially that was all part of our discussion of conveyance,
Correct.
but then all of a sudden, there was an offer to pay, right? And so that's on the
gotten a little
table.
weird.
Brian?
Favor of it, I don't see any real issue in consolidating those parcels.
Okay, Pam, just to encapsulate with our city attorney has indicated is that he doesn't see any issues with this, and he's comfortable with us moving forward with this agreement. Okay, after that recommendation by staff and by our city attorney, I'm looking for some council action.
Mayor, I will so move that we do the consolidation of those parcels based on their description in Progress Park.
Okay, Councilor Bearable moves item number 6, which is the authorization of the consolidation of parcels in Progress Park, which is the former Spectra Health parcels. Is there support for that?
Support.
Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion?
I would ask,
Councilor Friedlieb.
does this create, Brian, any potential liability on our part with the pending litigation on the building's usage? And that's a little bit of a concern for me as far as like,
The school already owns that property, Brian, the Spectrum building, so there shouldn't be a problem.
Correct, and that was my opinion. I can take a closer look at it, but on first glance and first blush, it doesn't seem that simply combining these properties is going to create any liability or potential for liability for the city.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Did you get that motion, Pam?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Britt?
I believe we got all the items on the agenda.
Okay, thank
I know
you.
we jumped around, I apologize, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, very good. So, no other items of concern coming before the council. So, we will adjourn the committee of the whole meeting and then till our next one, which is next month. Anybody have anything else you'd like to add?
I do have two things I want to point out. Next Monday at 10 o'clock, we're having a ribbon cutting for our downtown grant program kickoff at Cane Lakes. And I'm going to contact also Popper's Bar and Commercial Refrigeration and see if they want us to come do a photo op in front of their businesses as well that same day. And after the ribbon cutting, we will be at Virginia Community Foundation for refreshments. All the council's invited. We really appreciate you there. The mayor is going to speak on behalf of VITA. because
Okay, I guess so.
None of the VITA members felt comfortable speaking about it. Thank you,
Wow.
Mayor.
Okay, well, my pleasure.
And then also, we are working on a CDBG resolution for COVID-related expenses. And they can be for expenses we've already incurred or things we need. So I've been working with Chief Lewis and Chief Frederickson, Deputy Chief Frederickson, on looking at our capital item list for next year and seeing if there were any items that could be related or tied to COVID. And there are, in the amount of about $49,000. So I'm going to be bringing that resolution forward for that application and hoping that we can get some funds to help pay for those much-needed material that the ambulances need.
And then based on that conversation with the CBDG grant application, the application will be in the time required. As far as the resolution goes,
I'm waiting for confirmation on that.
and if we get confirmation, we can do the resolution Tuesday. If that's not acceptable, we may have to have a special meeting on Monday just for that one item. And as our city attorney indicated, we could do it all by Zoom if we needed to do so, instead of bringing everybody forward to do that, so.
Correct.
But we're hoping that they'll accept it on the following day.
And I should have an answer about that today.
Thank you very much, Britt. Okay.
And one other grant
Yes,
opportunity.
please do.
VITA had their special meeting this morning regarding 2 loans that they're going to give as part of the downtown program. And they briefly mentioned that the IRRB has allocated funding. They call it the Taconite Tax Relief Area Assistance Program, I think is what it's called. And they are doing our downtown program that we created and made it into a program available region-wide for the whole Taconite tax area at actually a really good ratio of 1 to 4. So we put in 1, they give us 4. So if we were to say, ask IRRB for $400,000, we would need to come up with $100,000. So VITA was requesting that the city consider doing a resolution at their next meeting on the 23rd to allow for application of that program, which closes July 6th.
Okay, very good. That's
We'll
fantastic.
bring more information forward to the council meeting on that.
Okay, yep, please do. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Anything else? We stand adjourned, 11:02 a.m. Have a good day, everybody.